Okay, so the floor is all yours, Dragnfli.
All right, so this is our third in a four-part series on creating effective rituals. Tonight we're going to talk about doing small and large group rituals and what the differences between them. Oksana, just so you know, I emailed you a handout before you came tonight. So
Okay.
If anybody's interested, she will be happy to send you. And I also have a book which I'll send around, which is very interesting. It's by Oberon Zell. I'm sorry, Isaac Bonner. I also ordered one by the other. So this is just a very interesting kind of. There's every single person that I know who does rituals will have different thoughts on ritual. Even if you do everything but one thing different in your ritual, rituals are always.
Isaac Bonner would tend to be a pretty good author,
and
yeah.
that's okay. No, I mean that's not necessarily what he says. That's my opinion. Just from having a little bit of experience watching folks do rituals and participating in other people's rituals as well as creating and asking people to participate in my rituals. So tonight we're going to kind of look at how small and large group rituals differ, because there's definitely a difference between having, say, 8 people in a room compared to 100 or more. There's many levels of large group rituals. I guess you could say small, medium, and large, but I just want small and large simple. And then really understanding those differences in a way that makes it so that you can create rituals for a particular group that can be more effective, right? Because if you do stuff that might work with a small group, it might get lost in a large group setting, or something you might do with a large group might get a little cumbersome for a small group. So, and then I'll review a few different kinds of group rituals. I did talk about literally like the content of rituals and stuff like that in the introduction, so I'm not going to really go over that kind of stuff too much. I'm going to try to introduce some newer information, if you will. Also, like kind of when you should do rituals, where you should do rituals, and what like are important elements to consider when you're creating a group ritual. Once again, depending on the size and sometimes the place, and then how those elements differ for small and large groups. So group rituals can be used to facilitate either a few people or many people focusing on like the same purpose, whatever that purpose happens to be. It can be celebrating the turns of seasons or creating a place to help members of the community connect with each other, achieve a goal, honor each other or honor the gods. And community rituals really are a great way to create cohesiveness in a group. I know that I'm closer over the years to some of my friends that I do ritual with on a regular basis, and we sort of exchange energy on a regular basis, than I am to some of my family members. And I prefer those people. I know everybody, like, just on the matter of like personality, but just, I mean, literally, I know these people better. Like, I feel closer to them, like, spiritually, they're my family. And that, I don't know if that's just for me very important, but I think most of us that are pagan, we are pagan to spirituality, and that connection with other folks who are like-minded, even if it's not exactly the same. It's very important. So these are big and small group rituals are ways to achieve those kinds of things. All right, so in smaller groups, of course, the ritual itself can be more intimate. It can be a more intimate topic. It's definitely more likely that possibly all people who are attending the ritual will also be participating in the ritual. Like they'll have some role, whether they're helping with libations or they're calling a quarter or whatever happens to be going on in that ritual. That's just our, sort of that's a Celtic sort of typical way to do rituals. And these types of rituals create sort of an atmosphere where bonding can be very intense, like I just mentioned, like really, especially like I was a member of a women's group, and we were so close to each other, like we really knew each other, and it was like very interesting to go into rituals and like, because you're all on the same page about whatever you're trying to do. And over 15 years doing that with those folks really made it very intense. By that measure, most people who do this kind of ritual together are also usually friendly outside of those groups too. So that makes that bond even that much stronger, right? So, these are very powerful rituals for those groups that are doing those kinds of really intense things. And then larger groups, like I'd say like 9 or more, after about 8, you kind of start losing a little bit of cohesiveness in the intimate department. It starts, but there's just too many things going on. There's too many people, there's too many distractions, there's just too much stuff. Too many pretty shiny things to, to be maybe as intimate. When you're in public, that's not necessarily the time to be intimate with people on that level. And I don't mean having sex. I mean, talking about maybe things like healing. So maybe you're talking about your feelings, or maybe you're having a life passage that's super, important to you, but you don't really want to share it with a whole bunch of people, that kind of stuff. So usually if you have a larger group, of course, there's usually more ritual team members, but there's also a lot more people who are just attending. Those people who are just attending, maybe what they're going to be doing in the group is going to be doing things like helping to raise energy, participating in the sharing of libations or making offerings. When you're working with a large group, it's to be really impactful. This is one of Spellcaster's bits of wisdom. It's all about theater. Go big or go home. And I mean by go big, I mean like when you engage the senses. Is that me?
Yes.
Oh my God. Oh, excuse me.
That's
not me. Sorry, let me Oh.
It was Spellcaster calling.
You can take that back, John.
No, people texting me who don't realize that I'm doing something. I apologize. Okay.
Spell has more wisdom.
Sure. So Spell's wisdom of theater, think Walt Disney World, right? Like when you go there, it's like you're immediately kind of swept up in that whole atmosphere. It's larger than life. We can do those kinds of things with stuff like everybody wearing the same colors, or there's some particular costume type theme that we're all going for, or because it's seasonal, we'll be like doing something visually that's very, specific to that season, let's say. The other things are, well, we're going to actually go over all these wonderful things that we can do to make theater, as Kip would say. He says theater, not just theater. And that's engaging all the senses. We're going to talk a little bit how we can maybe engage people more in various different group settings. The biggest one is making sure that there's an actual purpose for the ritual. That's not just like a scattered. I've been to rituals where it's like the theme and what the ritual is about was so disconnected, and you were just like, and that immediately makes people not get it, and they're not going to get anything out of a ritual if there's no stated, not just I guess, I think it's Mabon, so maybe it's going to be a harvest ritual, and then you show up and it's something else, and you're like, oh, okay, but nobody said anything, right? So I'm sure as many of you have been to my rituals and have been team members, and you've gotten my thick scripts, right, with all the information about what's going on in the ritual,
Oh, you mean
what
your tones?
everybody is going to say, right? And then at the beginning of usually the Thursday night before the ritual, I would be there telling them all about the season, and then I would also tell them what the ritual is about, so they knew when they came on Saturday that this is what we were doing, so that they could be prepared if they wanted to. Sometimes I'm not so sure if anybody wanted to. And then at the beginning of the ritual, I tell them what's going on. What are we here for? What are we going to do? Including like what we're going to do during like the practical, like we're going to make an amulet, or we're going to infuse our energy into something, or we're just celebrating the season, or whatever it happens to be. So I think that if you can not only know what the purpose is and know kind of what the flow of the ritual is, then people can get more into it, and then they're not stumbling around trying to figure out what the heck's going on and miss things from you maybe when you're standing up there talking about, other stuff, gods and goddesses and such. So really, that's a really important one. And understanding that attendees at any kind of ritual, no matter what it is, they are engaged through both participation and the experience. So they may not be like literally doing the speaking or calling the quarter or doing what, but they're there and they're participating in the energetic flow of that ritual. So this is one where, especially if you're leading and creating rituals, you'll understand what I'm saying. It is utterly different to lead a ritual than to participate in one, in terms of what you're getting out of it. So if you're not good with getting your energy from that ritual from other people being able to experience whatever you're trying to get across, and you are going to be a very disappointed high priest or high priestess, because that's really what a facilitator of anything is really about, is you get pleasure and joy from helping other people experience whatever it is that the point of your ritual is, right? And that's not a bad thing. I don't think that's necessary. I think that's like a next level of how you can participate and experience a ritual. So I think on some levels, as someone who writes rituals, sometimes the deepest part of the ritual is actually writing it. Because you're doing all your research and you're like sort of going down rabbit holes, and you come up and you're like, oh my God, how did I get there? Like you can get new insights, like sometimes, especially if you're doing the same things over and over and it's a new topic, and it gets really exciting because you're like, oh, this is, a little fresh, little exciting new thing, you know what I mean? So there is a very big difference between just participating in a ritual, even if you're calling a quarter, if you're not the one that's facilitating the whole thing. In smaller rituals, it's very possible, and it has most of the women's group in this rituals that I was in, everybody was facilitating the ritual really, because there's a small enough group of people, and everybody knew what we were doing. Just like here, when we come, we have a specific kind of opening, healing, and we cross the cauldron, and at the end, we close the whole space. So you know what's going to happen, right? That's a ritual in and of itself. Now you're more open because you don't have to think about all that stuff, right? What's going to happen? I don't know what's going to happen. Then you got to think about it, right? So that's the point of ritual, right? Is that you don't have to think as much. But when you're writing it, it doesn't work that way. Sometimes keeping it simple, especially for large rituals, can be very effective. Most of us who have done rituals started out with very elaborate rituals. Thought we could do all kinds of cool in our mind, we're like the movie scene of what our ritual might look like, you know what I mean? And then we do it and we're like, Holy Mary, Mother of God, how did I get myself into this mess? This is not going to work. It's going to take us 10 hours to do what I want to do because there's 50 people here. We cannot all spill our guts in this ritual or whatever. Even like if you think about something, if it takes an individual person more than about 5 seconds to do it in the ritual, and there's 50 people in your ritual, add it up.
250 seconds.
How many times? I mean, and people lose.
25.
They lose their attention. I do. I mean, I have been in rituals where I've caught myself chatting to my neighbor, and then something was happening, and I'm like, what are we doing? because maybe it was too long, it took too long for everybody, like a nice idea, but just a little bit too much. Having said that, of course, most of y'all have been to my Yamaya rituals, and they are very long and expansive, but I try to do that. That's one of the reasons I do it the same every single time, because people even come to me and go, oh, I love this part of it, or you know what I mean? They get used to doing it so that they will get more out of it, because it's an intense ritual. It's New Year's, you're supposed to be getting rid of old shit and trying to make yourself new for the new year. I mean, that's pretty like an important milestone every year to pass over, and a lot of people just, drink themselves into the next year. Do so after ritual, of course. But I mean, so it's not that you can't do very elaborate rituals, but you have to think about how they're going to work. Like, and then if things don't work, don't feel afraid to change it for the next time if you're going to do the same kind of thing the next time.
Is it like basically, you're like doing like any sort of like presentations instead of thinking your audience? You gotta think practicality, and it's like, okay, yeah, I want to do this one thing, but I've got an audience of thousands of people, or 50, give or take. So you gotta think, is this even realistic expectations?
Yes.
Because in my mind, I'm like, oh, well, this would be great. I've got 50 people, let's do this, but okay. Yeah, you got
And
it.
it's a delicate balance also between being too boring, too simple, and then being too complicated.
And then
So if you don't engage people enough, then they're going to get distracted also, or if you engage them too much, then they're going to get too overwhelmed, and that's also distracting because they're not going to.
Either way, they're going to shut down.
Yeah, exactly. You got one more to go. So, and that's why every ritual you learn a new lesson every time you do especially larger rituals. I have actually.
Sometimes, so in my experience, right, it sometimes doesn't even happen at the ritual. Sometimes as you're writing it, you have this whole idea, and as you're sitting down to write it, it changes like 20 times, and it gets like it's a life of its own. And then even after you finally finish, you're like, okay, I got it. Then you get to the ritual and you start doing it. It's like, oh yeah, I forgot that part. I guess. So yeah, it's a labor of love, as they say.
It is a labor of love.
It is for sure. You have to be able to get your fix from that part of it, because though I have to say that over the years, people have been so sweet and kind, and you never know, even if you feel like your ritual was, you made all kinds of mistakes, only probably you made those mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people will get things out of your ritual, like you don't even realize it until they come up to you. And then for me, that's always like, even if I feel like I failed, I think about those people who, if I hadn't shown that up that night and done that ritual, that person wouldn't have gotten what they needed from that. And if only one or two people, get something out of it, that's to me the most important thing. As long as nobody,
And I think, just kind of off that, I think it's where spells, a little wisdom I always remember our ritual is, the perfect ritual speeds up the end of time. Spells saying.
Yeah, that's right at the end of my presentation.
It'll be perfect when you see it.
It will be. So when I say engage all your senses, I really mean like all of them, like especially visually. Most people are very visual, so making sure that you kind of see, like especially when you're doing things outside at night, it's kind of easy because you can get moody with mood lighting, twinkle lights, maybe a fire, bonfire, that kind of thing, candles, all different kinds of stuff like that, props. I have a whole closet that is just ritual props. It is the biggest closet in my house.
Confirmation.
It has been confirmed.
Independently confirmed.
Okay, who has a closet with all ritual? That all made me feel so much better.
Yeah, it's a room for her.
Yeah, mine's a whole, where our spiritual space is it's a guest bedroom of my home, so, and that's all it's dedicated to is ritual and all that stuff.
So the other thing that's really important, I think, is making sure you engage people's hearing, like music, chanting. Those things are really useful for getting everybody into the same space. right? To get in the same kind of mood, in the same kind of, who is eating me? I'm so sorry, everyone. So I love music. As you know, I always use music in my rituals, and I don't mind recorded music. It's fantastic to have live music. I have a drummer usually for my Yama rituals. I'm always so thrilled that he comes for me. But do not feel afraid about using recorded music. Sure. There's so much great pagan music out there these days. So many great bands out there.
Oh, yeah.
So many great artists.
As opposed to how many years ago when there was nothing?
Yeah.
Or very little.
Yeah.
The world's a changing place.
Yes. So also, I think it's very important in ritual to use more like kinesthetics or moving type of things. So using either walking, like entering into ritual circle, if you back out, big enough place where you can actually process into the space, you can use that as like a meditative walk or whatever, or dancing, or any other kind, like sometimes you can do in place, moving in place kinds of movements, maybe people are less, mobile or whatever. But that's also really involved. Usually when you do that, it's either there's usually music or chanting. So you're really involving everything at once. So you're really like turning off the monkey mind, if you will, because you're engaging it with all these things that are going on, right? The original theater was ritual, right? So all these fantastical theatrical things are all based in religious rituals.
Kind of like showing how they did the hunt. They reenacted their hunt. That was part of their pageantry, theatrics.
Yeah, exactly. And then finally, or actually not finally, but next to last is making sure you involve people's sense of smell. Some people are sensitive to sage and other kinds of things, so I always try before I do ritual to, especially if it's inside, I try to make sure that nobody's allergic or would be, like if they have asthma or would be compromised. So it's definitely something I think we've always tried to be really, conscientious of. But if it's outside, I hope that nobody has problems. Don't get near the incense if you have to step back when it comes through. But engaging like with sage or mock chomp or all the other different kinds of scents that you can imagine, those things also. So if you're doing all these things at the same time, you're smelling stuff, you're moving around, you're hearing music, you're seeing all kinds of, whatever, everybody's dressed, altars are set, and it's the bonfire is lit. It's like, you're really engaging everything. But don't forget to engage also that sixth sense, that spiritual sense, that, I think when you can get all that stuff and you've got monkey mind turned off, that's when sixth spiritual sense kind of does get engaged kind of almost automatically. I think that's when I would call it getting in your zone, right? When you're in that place where you're just like, I'm doing it. I'm not here, I'm not there, I'm in this weird, wonderful
Between the worlds.
between
There you go, yeah.
Exactly.
That really explains like with meditation and like transport.
Yeah, exactly.
Then you have to literally shut your body down.
And like most people do that by doing all those different kinds of things, engaging when you're like distract the senses.
The world between worlds.
Yes, exactly. So without going into a lot of details, those are things to think about, like just making sure that when you're writing your rituals, think about the size of the group, who your group is. Like if you have a group of women, you may not want to give a ritual that's all about a male god, if that's not what they're doing, or vice versa, right? Or whatever. So think about what your group is about. If it's about, youth and all that kind of stuff, and it's all a bunch of old geezers, then possibly it might not be the right thing to do. Right? So just think about those
Unless
kinds
you're
of
trying to put on
things.
clinical uses that being on
You're vitalizing the soul.
They might give you a piece of their mind. So different kinds of group rituals that I've kind of seen, and I think we've probably all engaged in it some time or another. Particularly celebrating the wheel of the year is a big one. Everybody, I think most people do it sort of like the Celtic tradition sort of way. At least all the ones I've ever been to. like everything, FPG, even some Gardnerian ones I went to seem to be a little bit on the, they're just sort of very much the same in terms of celebrating the wheel of the year, right? You're celebrating the cross quarters and the equinoxes and the solstices. And these things are, you know, they represent celebrating the passing of time, the evolution of life. Like these are all like themes that you should think about, like when you're thinking about these kinds of rituals for groups. The sameness yet the differentness, like every year the same thing, you know, happens at this time of the year. In the spring, the new leaves come out. It's a different spring, they're different leaves, but it's still spring and leaves are still coming. So like thinking of the symbolism of all of that and using that to your advantage when you're creating your rituals, right? Community building, like having a ritual that's specifically about connecting with each other and whatever you're trying to do. Communing with the divine. That, to me, that's both honoring the gods and the goddesses, and a lot of times we do rituals that are specifically for particular deities, but I also mean the ancestors and spirits that are generally about, if you work with those kind of things. Like to me, it's like whatever you do. It doesn't matter what I do, but whatever you do, you know what I mean? Use those time, that communing with the divine, any way that really feels right. Because we can try to reconstruct ancient religions as much as we like, but we will never really know exactly what really happened.
Because we weren't there.
It's nice, it's
Or
fun.
were we?
Right? But it's not realistic to think
But when you were in
that
the
we
dirt,
could
you
even
forgot.
really imagine it. Like they didn't have electricity
It's like-
or
They didn't have
toilets.
You don't want to go
There was
back?
no refrigerators back then. I mean, we could never put ourselves in their place
No.
on any level, really. Like,
We've
we could
never
be
faced,
inspired by them,
we've
but
never faced starvation in February and March because the food
Precisely.
ran short.
precisely.
And therein lies the whole dichotomy of why a lot of people complain why spell work seems to not, because it's like if you're surviving, if your spell work is literally waiting for like whether you're going to survive the next winter or not, yeah, you're going to have that much energy for it. And the corollary to that is, well, I want to do it the ancient way. We're like, well, I'm sure that if they had lighters back then, they'd probably use it too. You don't got to use ancient salt candles, yeah.
So my thought is just like, without being disrespectful, don't get too stuck
Right.
in what is something that people are speculating about at best. You know, maybe they might even be educated speculation, but it's nevertheless it's speculation, right? Other kinds of group rituals are things like cleansing and protection rituals, particularly ones that really engage like the elements, right? How many rituals have you been to where they've done a cleansing with, what do you use for cleansing?
Water.
No, well,
How would you use it though? What would you call that?
A washing.
Asperging?
Thank you.
Asperging.
Mhm.
Spurging. I call it flinging water on people with a branch.
Some people call it
Pine branch, soak it
ablutions
in water?
to, like to,
That's,
yeah, where they
Yeah,
kind of,
that
yeah.
works too.
yeah.
Asperging
that
is when
be-
you fling the water out.
Yeah,
Right.
Asperging is
I was
when
thinking
they
of
walk.
spurging, but I know what you're saying, because
Mhm.
I guess I have seen rituals where like somebody walks around with a bowl. I'm not sure how it's clean to like one person after another is washing their face.
Antibacterial.
Pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID.
Exactly. Oh, wait a minute, you know what, they usually have a
Sacred
bowl
rubbing
and the guy
alcohol.
next to him has the jug, right?
Right.
I'm thinking Catholic here, I think, right?
Oh.
Like, and only in movies, because I've never been Catholic. I've been a lot of other things.
A lot of
They get
Greek
the washing of the
traditions,
feet.
they'll wash hands before,
Right, yes.
before ritual.
Or wash
Right.
feet.
Wash feet? Yeah, wow.
Catholics wash. Catholics, yeah.
Islam, yeah.
Uh-oh. He knew that.
Catholics don't.
Hey, I was a prior Catholic, okay?
Many of us were.
I was supposed to have been a prior Catholic.
Supposed to have been.
That's supposed to have been.
Did I miss the washing of the feet?
It's
just an
I
Easter
never
time.
washed my feet, but like I said, I was a very bad Catholic.
I think it
So
was more of a
Ditto.
Jewish custom.
that's more Jewish.
I've heard,
I think it's
You've
more of a
heard the
Jewish
Pope,
custom.
But the Pope has gone around washing like cardinals' feet.
No, well, it's,
Just because
it's,
he was apologizing.
But still, it's a ritual.
He does it right.
Okay.
I think it's into like
I think
doing
it's
like
a form
like
of
a good
humility.
Samaritan
It's a
thing.
Yeah. So
Yes,
John used to do it all the time.
So when in Catholic traditions, when they do that, that's you, like I was saying, it's a form of humility. In their doctrine, it's like they're trying to do what Christ did, a sense of
Right. humility,
humility, saying, "Oh, I'm going to treat you as an equal," kind of thing. But it's not like a ritual. Now, well, I think what you're thinking of is kind of like she was thinking, the Jewish tradition or the
Jewish or
Muslim
Muslim.
tradition, where they actually do. They have a whole thing before they even start to do washing of the
I
hands
think
and
it's a question of if you wash your own feet or if someone washes
So
your
yeah,
feet.
I mean, we're talking about group rituals here, so really,
No one's gonna
I
wash
was
their
more
own
thinking
feet.
of asperging, though I do
Asperging.
think I have seen that in ritual where they do that, like everybody, like I said, I think it's weird that they're all doing.
water balloons.
Then there's a ritual bath.
That's not exactly.
Yeah, certainly. There's a ritual bath where it's progressive according to rank, and of course, no man on the total.
Oh well,
Dirty
yeah.
water. Dirty water.
It's the pee-pee water.
Toilet water.
There you go. I know
Oh,
Alex.
So I
God.
was thinking more big pagan rituals where we fling water each other with the that's right. That's really kind of cool. So what would you do with air? What would you call that if you're cleansing with air?
Usually.
Smudging.
Smudging. Is there anything else that you like? I'm asking like, 'cause I'm also interested in learning more. If anybody has an interesting new.
Incense.
Smoke cleansing.
Oh well, yeah.
It's smudging.
Smoke
So,
cleansing, yeah.
what about fire?
Fires are.
So fires do purpose, right? It can burn and protect. It can get rid of crap, it cleanse and protect. Double duty, right?
Well, if it's Beltane, you have Beltane fires.
Yes, you do.
The bellfire.
And summer solstice also. Actually, they would drive their flocks through the balefires
Mhm.
Yeah.
to both cleanse and protect them.
Yeah.
So that's a big one, of course.
For your ritual
And
people.
How many times
Mhm.
have we burned things, right, to get rid of them? Right?
Yep.
Sometimes we have rituals where we like burn things that we need to like get out of our lives and get rid of, right?
Or send messages.
Yeah. But also I think we think of fire as like a protective thing, right? 'Cause when this is kind of like back to the caveman days wild thing where you have like
Keeps the
a fire
darkness
on a
away.
stick
Yeah.
and you're like, oh, get away from me, you
Fire
beast.
good, darkness bad.
Right, it's a protection.
Well-
Like it is, I mean, it's psychological, like, you know.
I mean, I think that's a big part of like the Yule type celebrations, that you have the idea that you light the fire overnight on longest night because you need to bring back the sun.
I was thinking also like with, even with Samhain and you do the burning of leaves with the message of grief, and it's kind of almost like a messenger in a way.
That's what I was saying earlier.
Yeah, but it's not, protection, it's going to send
A
it.
faster way to send it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The fire.
Like
goes-
send
Well,
it
you
now
know what,
instead
save
of
that
send
for
it
the
later.
next thing we're gonna talk about, because it's more appropriate for the next one. Just hold on,
Or-
I'm gonna make you talk. So what do you think in terms of cleansing and or protection? What kind of earth thing would you use?
Rock salt.
You,
Crystal.
you take the mud and you wipe it all over your body. That's cleansing.
Rock salt.
My baths work.
I like the
That's
salt,
worse.
yeah,
Yeah.
because like a lot of people, when they asperge,
Salt,
they'll have
yeah.
water and salt, right?
Right.
You know, or you'll cleanse the space with
Mhm.
salt, right?
So
use
salt to seal your circle.
Yep.
Or
Or your house
Yeah,
for
crystals
protection.
or salt, I would imagine, yeah.
What?
Leaves and branches
Leaves and branches?
to use
What is
to
certain?
Sticks.
seal the circle.
Yeah, you can take your stick.
Well, we're
around.
talking specifically about cleansing and protecting here.
Well,
So
this
those
is
are different
protecting.
things.
Very much so.
Oh, yeah. try-
I put on here amulets as
Oh.
like an earth, because it's a physical thing you can
Metal.
hold, and it would be one of those things where it would include all the crystals and anything that you can imagine. For
Get your
protection,
acorns.
Right? Of course. But I didn't think of the salt for cleansing. I don't know, that's this list. So the next thing is making offerings.
Oh,
When you were saying like the burning things to make burnt offerings or whatever. And that's like not only making offerings for if you're gonna ask for something, like I'm gonna give you this if you give me that. hopefully you're not gonna hold on to their hands or their arms until they give you what you want. I think that's kind of rude.
Well,
Or
it depends.
you could be doing
Yeah,
all
there's
kind of gratitude.
There's a lot of says that you have to do that to her.
Some magic you've done that's come to pass, or you're just happy and grateful that, you know, whatever. So those are certainly big group rituals that certainly can be done. And then life passages, obviously, you know, births, puberty rites, motherhood, fatherhood, saging, hunting, hand fasting, marriages, partings, divorces, funerals. I'm sure there's more. And also rituals for personal commitments and like starting or completing a spiritual journey, like a year and a day type program, or a graduation from some like a school course if you have a course, you know, whatever spiritual course that goes away, just like graduating from high school, or if you're a high priest or a high priestess or an up and coming one, that ceremony that gives you your first. You're a high priestess. You're a high priest.
That would
That's
depend
like
on the
a
color,
really,
actually.
and that's not something that you would do necessarily. That's like a public ritual that you would do in the front of, more than likely, in the minimum, your small group that you work with, whether that's a coven or whatever it happens to be. And I'm sure there's more public rituals that you can come up with. But knowing, once again, the reason I even mention these things is to know what you're doing when you're doing your rituals, so that you can have a good, successful ritual. Because if you don't have a focus, then it doesn't really make any difference what you do. I mean, people might have fun, but it may not be a meaningful or genuine sort of experience.
Fun is not focused.
For anyone, because if the people in the ritual, as on a selfish note, if the people in the ritual are not getting anything out of it, you ain't getting your Zappa energy at the end.
Right.
As the high priest.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. You're more drained. Thank you very much. That's
And then you had to carry all the weight of the ritual yourself.
precisely.
Well, not only that, there's all that sense of, at least in my experience, right? I've been to some rituals where a lot of people that were not as well known, they would just come in. And to me, when the sacred time starts, kind of thing, it's ritual and there's no focus, it makes me feel like those people who are coming in there and just goofing off are just partying. And I feel that it's disrespectful to the actual sacred space that is being made, because they're just here to kind of party and they're just, you see them, you know, but that's just me, like you're saying. It's like, you got to focus. And if they're just there to just party, then why even come, you know?
Well, I mean, when you're in a big enough ritual situation, especially if you're the one leading the ritual, you don't have time to deal with the people on the periphery that are distracted and possibly distracting other people in the ritual.
That's why you have a person with a stick.
Yeah.
Yes. Circle guardians, perhaps?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, circle guardians.
Valkyries.
Oh,
yeah.
The Valkyries. Okay, take your
Yeah,
carcass
at the grove,
away.
there's two of us Valkyries, and we have sticks.
Well, what I was
Really
going
good
to say
sticks.
was, if you're leading a ritual and people are like that, allow it to roll off your back like water on the duck's back, because you're only going to get more unfocused
Mhm.
if you choose to try to deal
Navigate.
with that stuff. That's why you have either attendants or ritual people helping you. If it's that bad, maybe you can send someone else to deal with it for you. But being too distracted, I mean, you can't be present to even lead a ritual if you're trying to control little fires that are going on. The bigger the ritual, usually the more little fires
Yeah.
are going on in various places.
Well, I'll never
Sparks
forget the
fly.
Imbolc where there was a literal fire. It was in COVID.
Ah,
We were doing it, and
I
the,
remember
and the
that.
fire pit literally went through
Collapsed.
and ground literally caught fire in the middle of the ritual.
I was like, it's got a little tube right underneath.
Well, I remember there was one ritual that we had where it was a lot of people, and somebody decided, instead of focusing, they would want to try to jump over the fire. And I think one of his foot got
remember
on
that.
fire or whatever. Yeah,
That stupid boy.
and,
Yes, indeed. So you do have to pay attention to stuff like that, dumbasses like that. It's just like if you do anything public, you do have to have some sense of public safety and think about things like, how close are people going to get to the tiki torches? How close are people going to get to the fire? Are the candles on the on the altar going to burn your altar cloth? These are all practical issues that even if you're small, bigger groups for the tiki torches, but even at home, obviously. How many have big burn holes in their altar, their favorite altar cloth, because some candle that you thought was okay in that container really wasn't? Nobody here has
To me, it was
burned.
a small
No,
one.
but I had a big bare
Anything?
spot in my backyard.
Seriously.
Couple of them, yeah.
A couple.
Yeah.
Like, I'm only one,
Well,
and he's got a
I
couple.
had a bare spot in my backyard for a good minute.
Oh, good. Yeah.
I mean,
It was a little hot underneath.
I wear veils to rituals where there are fires. Believe me, I'm well aware of fire hazards. I'm a tree.
Yes, you are.
I have a nice burn in my hand.
But, so you do have to kind of have some practical safety things in mind, like make sure if you're doing a ritual in the dark that there's not stuff people can trip on. And just common sense stuff. But that's a time consuming, and there's like so many details, which is why people would get giant ritual scripts, because all of that stuff was in there and I wouldn't forget. And you didn't get to forget either.
Oh, no, because there was that one time when people were actually doing that deliberately, holding the ritual, and the candle kind of got really close to the script, and this was way back with Stell, if you remember.
That's when you write on flash paper, so it's dramatic.
I
did it on purpose.
It was for effect.
Yeah, one time at
I
Sally,
totally planned.
filled cardboard boxes with aluminum foil and filled them with candles. And everybody came and lit the candle, and eventually the cardboard boxes caught fire.
I remember
And
that.
Ricky had to grab all the cardboard boxes, and he was running with them and putting them in the fire.
I remember
We're
that.
like, hi, ancestors.
It was appropriate. So if you're going to do stuff like that, what you do is roasting tins, because they're not flammable. Roasting tins are wonderful for tea lights or any other kind of small lights that might, A, light everything else on fire, or B,
Thought
get
the
wax all
aluminum
over it.
foil would be fine.
If you ever put water on the bottom or sand.
Always have water if you have a fire. I don't know, I didn't mean to break into like a safety.
It was inevitable.
Fire safety.
But they are things that you have to consider, like all those
So now
kinds
you
of
just need a
things,
ritual fire
especially.
safety manual?
Yeah, right.
Well, this is why we have specific fire tenders if we're anywhere with an official fire. Now, when we're at the park, we're not allowed to have a fire, so we have the safe little campfire. That's like this big.
I thought a campfire was like 4x4.
Oh, no, it's a little tin with like, loose end mounted in like a little metal thing. It's got like a little paraflame in the middle.
Full moon
And it's about this big.
campfire.
It has a lovely little campfire.
Oh, it's all contained, it's all.
It's right on the table.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But still keep that away from your veil
Yeah.
And your hair.
and your hair.
Don't ask me where I know that.
And those long, pretty
We won't,
flowing
we won't
sleeves.
Yeah, and
Oh,
yes.
no.
Seen that.
Yes, indeed.
I resemble that remark.
basically, part of being an effective ritual is be safe.
Yes, not killing the people in your ritual is a really good, or
Yeah.
harming them in any way.
That's-
Generally
that's-
ensures that they might come back again.
yeah.
The next time you want to do a ritual.
Oh, we can have a random sacrifice?
He's the only new guy here. He
I'm not
doesn't
new.
know about that.
I'm not new. New to you, not new to the crowd.
I was expecting to get straws at this
End up
point.
being sacrificed.
Yeah, sure.
Trying to jump a fire?
What? Yeah,
Don't jump
or-
the fire.
yeah, we can
So
say
like,
whatever
we
we
make
want.
them swallow fire.
So I think my final thing I want to talk about is where to do rituals, and as pagans and as earth-centered folk, I truly believe that if we can, we should try to do rituals outside. That is how we connect more with all the things that we honor. Having said that, sometimes it's not possible. So push the chairs back, put up an altar, and boom, any place could be a ritual space.
Mhm.
So don't feel like you have to if it's not realistic, feasible, like if it's a torrential rain outside,
Or 110 degrees.
possibly, what?
Or 110 degrees.
Or 110 degrees.
Yeah.
We live in
I think
Florida.
especially if it's 110 because I can think I can handle
Well,
a
I mean,
storm.
depends
Does
if
anyone
you're
have-
doing a solar ritual,
Lot-
everyone melting, like
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm good.
drive the
110
point
degrees,
home.
we're doing the
I'm good.
ritual in the pool.
Yeah, exactly.
It's called synchronized swimming ritual.
I like it.
Well, that's what you do to asperge everyone all the time.
Snow
Mystery
cones.
you have at a restaurant.
So does anybody have anything they'd like to share about ritual wisdom or things that they've done or not done or things they'll never do again? We like stories.
Well,
Share.
I think, the theatrical point is a really good one, especially when you have a large group. Because if you're trying to drive home the point about the theme of your ritual, if you can incorporate like a story or something very dramatic and very cool looking, you're going to convey the point to everyone all at once. In
Like a
just
mock fight?
like a 5-10 minute thing versus try and make everyone do it individually, which could take, 2,500 seconds.
Like a panto or a mock fight.
Yes. Mock fights, chariot racing,
Drumming.
drumming.
Well, at the solstices, there's a lot of times a fight between the Holly King and the Oak King,
Yes.
which is
Yeah.
a shifting of the
We had one
season.
recently.
So,
We had one
right,
recently.
yeah.
Yes.
My hand remembers.
Or creating
I-
a
Did you
big,
get
I tried to be nice to you, you're my boyfriend.
or creating a big wall for a staff or a sword to go through to make sure no one's on the other side.
Oh, yes.
I'm never gonna live that one down either.
As soon as they saw my sword on the table, they all ran.
That's because I almost killed Brood.
Yeah, that was.
It's not nice to kill.
It was an accident.
Happy relaxation.
I barely have a history of being violent at rituals.
Apparently, yeah.
Not your fault, you just let your spirit off the chain for a few minutes.
Yeah.
I can't help it, I transform into a wolf.
That's true. That is true.
And she likes to fight.
Tree wolf.
She is a tree wolf. She likes fighting with sticks.
Maybe you're a Belgian Malinois.
Now,
House
I'm
of trees.
I could be. I'm-
So I haven't heard a bunch from our
He's an
elders
alligator.
here who have done big and small rituals. Now is your opportunity to share with all folks, maybe not all your secrets, but a lot of these folks are coming up in the ranks and young folks are gonna be
Well,
the next generation. It's
one
important to
thing-
share our wisdom.
Clear, concise directions for everyone involved in the ritual, and at least 1 or 2 dry walkthroughs before the time of the ritual.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Those are
love
huge.
rehearsing. No one likes rehearsing. I love rehearsing.
Have a sense of humor because something inevitably is going to crop up, and it's like, yeah.
If you have a ritual outside and you are barefoot, make sure you cut your grass and rake it to make sure there's nothing in there that goes stabby stabby.
Or
Bitey
squishy,
bitey.
Or squishy, squishy.
That was not quite what I was expecting.
Enjoy that visual.
Asana, you cannot keep quiet.
No, I cannot keep quiet. I think it's really important to, depending on how simple the ritual is, and you let people know what's gonna be happening step by step as you're moving through the ritual, because if people are not in it and they're not having an acting part, then they may get lost. So I always say, now we will, whatever.
I love that.
Yeah.
Directions,
Yeah.
directions.
Oh, yes.
directions.
What did Spell call it? Herding cats or something?
And I do like to have audience participation to realize that it can get a little dull standing there watching everyone else do a ritual. So everyone should be participating, even if it's just a chant you get everybody doing, or, passing the lighter around before you light the candle, just so that they feel like they're part of the show.
Or having them write a note
That needs to happen before ritual, just
Yeah.
FYI.
Yeah.
Yeah,
People in
yeah,
your
it is.
ritual, you need to have written things happen before the ritual starts,
I-
or you will
They bring it
spend
with.
an hour.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
No one has enough paper,
Okay, I'll give you
or
that.
pens, everybody's like.
I'm gonna
But
do
that's
that.
when they,
Try a bit of
that's when they
advice.
hold up the note and we say words over the note. That's
Yeah.
pre-written
Yes,
before the ritual.
Yes.
That's what we
I
do.
would rephrase
My
that.
ritual advice is this: assume everything is going to take 5 times longer than it will in your head.
Oh, and people can't be more than one place at any particular time, no matter how you envisioned it in your head.
No matter how
If there's-
talented you are.
If they're serving cake and ale, they cannot light the candles too, so it's like physics.
Know who's going
Yeah, I
Understanding
understand.
They
physics.
don't have.
Yeah.
Well, that's where you know that you can actually have more people participate in your ritual. So,
Yes.
like, that's the nice thing about big group rituals is that you can have more people actually participate in it and have small parts. I do recommend that if you're doing any science ritual, include as many people as possible in the actual function of the ritual. Because like you were saying, it makes them feel more a part of it.
Keeps them awake.
And keeps them
Yeah.
away.
I would also like to add
Too much, maybe.
that if you are new to doing the ritual, speaking to this, so it is perfectly okay to take initiative. So if you're standing there kind of like, oh, my first ritual, what do I do? You're trying to help and you see people doing something. It's perfectly okay to, oh, can I help you with the cakes and ale? It's kind of this and that, instead of like, I don't want to do anything because they might be wrong.
Well, that would be on the part of the group too, to make people feel
Yeah, that's
like
true.
they could
Yeah.
Do that.
participate. May I
Because-
help? Yes.
Yeah.
Would you like to handle?
Well, I was
that?
gonna say, because in that regard, you got a lot of like, if someone's new, they're gonna be like, well, they were already here first, they know what they're doing, I have no clue what I'm doing, so let them take the reins, because they're, more experienced and I'm inexperienced, and a lot of people are like, well, let me sit back, because a lot of people aren't gonna just take initiative.
If they want to do that the first time, fine, but if they show up the second time, I'm gonna give them
Yeah,
something to do.
yeah, exactly.
Well, if they show up again, I definitely will be like, oh.
I know you. I've seen you
Do
before.
something for my ritual.
I think that for easy rules like minioning can be really helpful. So like if someone's fairly new, they can minion for like the quarter caller, and then the quarter caller can kind of like teach them like this is what you do, and then after a ritual or two, they're the quarter caller,
Yes.
and then you kind of rise through the ranks.
Okay. My grandmother, when she was alive, used to do a New Year's burn and rope ritual. And what she always has taught me, when you do your ritual, when you're burning your rope, make sure you know what type of rope it is.
Oh.
And it's because you want to make sure you get a rope that's a natural rope, that's cotton, that will burn correctly, because some ropes are now made with plastic.
Right.
Yeah, it's like,
Oh, that's a.
Or just melt into plastic.
Yeah, melt into
So-
mel.
The wisdom there is know the stuff you're using.
Yeah.
Yes.
And know if it goes wrong, have multiple options of turning it
Have it
out.
right.
Always have
A
water
backup.
present if there's fire.
Oh,
And
I was
fire.
gonna say, like, different rituals and stuff like that, or other people who have done those. Have you figured out that
Water and oil.
why one ritual had that divine experience you're saying, the spirit experience, right? And then the other one didn't. Like, do you have any tips, tricks, or advice?
If you're asking why one ritual affects you so, like you get into that other space so much, and then other ones you don't have that experience, this is part of what the beauty of ritual is, that some people will actually have that in that same ritual, other people may not. So there's really kind of a, we don't know, kind of thing.
Yeah, everybody's gonna react.
I think a lot of it also goes back to all the elements she was talking about.
Yeah.
Depends
If,
on
like, you
how
can
good
lose
engagement
a
you
few elements, but at some point, if you lose too many, you know, like if, like I've been in some rituals where I lost it, but the ritual was like 3 hours long.
Yeah.
For
You know.
example, let's say
45
the
minutes should
rituals
be
of
max.
fire,
45 minutes, no more than
Maybe
an
an
hour. Right.
Oh, yeah.
let's
I'm
say
sorry, losing.
rituals of fire ritual and you're primarily water, you might not feel the energy then.
Yeah.
as an example, because you're counter the other.
I think it's also
I'm
your,
asking
it's,
something different than what Becky said.
well, well, because the ritual itself is an experience that's so individual for each person
Right, and then that's
attending.
what I was asking for as a collection of you personally, like, oh, these were really great and then these were okay. Did you see like common thread?
I would say engaging ones that are engaging all my senses, that are especially visually
I think to help
compelling,
prepare.
Yeah.
and what I can
presenters
hear.
are.
Yeah, and also like the content, like if the person doesn't, like is kind of maybe a little too fluffy, or there's no real meat to the thing, there's no, like, not that you can't have a fun ritual, I'm not saying that, but like if you're having a serious ritual, if it's a little bit too superficial, that can kind of, for me personally, that can kind of
But not only
make
that,
the ritual
like,
not as engaging.
maybe the more you practice and do ritual with certain people, you start getting a feel for their energy, and then maybe you're like, okay, well, I see with the energy here, maybe it seems to be working a little bit better in this one. So you kind of, maybe that can be part of it as well, you know?
Well, also, you also have to think too, a lot of people are drawn towards those things based on their personality. Like, I like things that are a little bit more music oriented, whereas some people are like, well, I don't really care for all that music and all that stuff at those rituals. So I'm gonna be tuned out by that. I'm gonna be like, okay, this is too much for me. Or I'm like, oh gosh, there's music. Yes, let me jump to this.
I do take notes and give myself feedback after the ritual.
Mhm.
You can't go right to sleep anyway.
No.
You're
No, yeah, no.
And everybody's gone and the house is all put back together.
Right.
And that's when I'm saying, you know, they really like this part, but that part I would do differently if I could do it again. And I take note of it so that the
Absolutely.
next time I write a ritual, I might include something different.
And also,
It's a pro right there.
So probably the real answer to your question is it's a little bit different for every person. So for some people, it might be the music, for some it might be the organization, or some it might be the black organization.
Yeah.
Not only that, I
The
think
other-
the intimacy that we were talking about earlier, for those of us who have a coven and we have a set group of people that are there all the time and ritual is done all the time the same way, it builds energy. So
Right,
each
yeah.
time you're more collectively able to kind of connect to that divine experience together and get that feeling of between the worlds, where you've left the mundane world and you're really experiencing that sense of that in-between realm where the etheric is touching down on you and you really feel the presence of the spirits,
and I
right?
think if you're trying to engage with more people, especially if you're newer to the process, or even if you're doing it for a while, like, don't do it all in a vacuum by yourself, because you're gonna write the ritual that you want. But if you engage with other people and you bounce ideas off with them, you can get more of a feel for a ritual that's not just for you, but for a wider group of people. Because exactly, there's gonna be some people who like this aspect or that aspect or that aspect. You don't wanna have too much all at once. But if you kind of brainstorm with other people to come up with ideas around the theme that can apply to different interests, you know, someone likes music, someone likes, you know, visual, someone else likes scents. You know, you can kind of come up with a way that incorporates more elements around a central theme.
Is that helpful?
I think I was still asking a different question.
Okay.
That's fine.
So anybody else have anything you want to add? So my final thing, which, oh, sorry.
No, I was just gonna ask, so collectively you all do ritual together, I'm assuming, yes?
Yes.
Okay,
Our next one is at Maybach.
okay. So are you celebrating the Celtic calendar or the Celtic wheel of the year more so than a Norse wheel of the year?
I think it depends on the
It's
person.
very
It-
eclectic.
We kind of end up doing both,
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's true.
just in the sense that we have the moon calendar, which I sort of lead, and then we have the public ritual Celtic calendar, because that's what most pagans in the area tend to flock to.
Well, that's what most people know, right?
People are used to that.
Yeah.
Right, oh, yeah.
We use the 8 Sabbats, you know.
8 solar Sabbats, right, yeah.
Yeah.
But different people write the rituals for different Sabbats every year,
Mm.
so they bring their personal, like when I do one,
Mhm.
my goddess is Minerva. It's going to be a more Roman-like theme, you know. This this year we even did an Humboldt, and it was, we had Minerva and Mars and Bacchus. And
Oh, yes, this-
it was, so
With
we
the
did,
Krampus cameo.
so we did
Yes,
it
they
at
were.
the Humboldt time, but we did, the Quintetaria in the Roman holiday
Mhm.
instead. So we have a lot of.
And our Yule tends to be
Nice.
very Viking.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Will be Viking, and Nabon's gonna be Druid, and, we include everybody.
Just depends on
And our
whoever
ending
gets the ritual.
Roll the dice.
Our closing ritual for our all-day event is actually gonna be all about Pagan Bride.
So. Get a little of everything.
So if no one else has anything to add, my final words are supposed to be, don't forget, perfect ritual speeds the end of time, which is spellcaster's ultimate advice to all.
Good thing I said that, or we would have been, or we would have spent the
It
end
would
of
have been
time.
too perfect.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
would have been too
Correct.
perfect, and we would have spent the end of time, so it's a good thing I
Well,
messed up.
perfection is, like, there's nothing left to strive for.
That's when we just get the
after
time
perfection,
turner.
So what's the point, right? I did include resources on, like I always do, so if anybody is, I don't actually need these, so I've got actually hands out for 1, 2, and 3.
I'll make sure I get it up on our Facebook page.
So if anybody wants handouts. Otherwise, I'm taking them home. You want them?
Thank you, Dragonfly.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Ann wanted to know where she could find those copies of the ritual.
Who?
And
Atsana has.
On our
I-
Facebook page, I'm gonna post them.
Okay.
I sent
They're not
They're
Atsana.
gonna be on the Facebook page. Atsana will post them.
You want to post all 3 of them?
Blow out
Hold
these
these
candles,
but hold it dear to everyone gathered here. From this grove we do depart, but keep its lessons in our heart. Blessed be, so mote it be, merry meet, merry part, and merry meet again.